Hi everyone, and welcome to this evaluagent webinar. My name is Matt Jones, and I'm joined by Xander Freeman of the Call Center Helper, which everybody will be very, very familiar with. Xander, nice to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you too, Matt. It's really nice. I was saying this to you like a couple of minutes ago. It's really nice to be on the other side of a webinar. But once you guys get all the stress, I just get to turn up and talk for half an hour. It's brilliant.
Yeah, but you guys have done some research, haven't you? So there's plenty to talk about today. I'm looking forward to a really good session.
Yeah, I think so. It's always nice as well, like, because as much as you and I can have our opinions on these things, it's always nice when it's actually backed up by hard research as well, not just CCH,
Yeah.
but we're drawing in the various different sources throughout the course of the next 45 minutes or so. So hopefully some really good stuff for the audience.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks to everybody that's joined so far. I think what we'll do is we'll just give it probably another a minute, Xander. Let everybody get settled down in the seats or at the desk with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. Get settled in for the next 45 minutes. I guess whilst people are waiting for us to officially kickstart this webinar, feel free to use the chat function. I think it's along the bottom bar, I think, Xander, isn't it? Typically, it is for me.
Do have a lovely habit of moving it. Every time you want to call out where it is, they do. Like it's the same with the
They
poll
move it.
as well. They move it. Yeah. So yeah.
Hopefully, it's at the bottom. People hopefully can find it down the bottom. It might be at the top right, but there's a chat function there. Please feel free to use that chat function throughout the webinar. We'll be monitoring it. We'll include comments and conversations that are happening there as we go through. And also there's a Q&A section at the end of the webinar today. So we'll use that area to facilitate questions as well. So I think it'll be a really enjoyable 40 minutes or so. And for everybody that's just joined, thank you for coming along to today's webinar. For those that haven't met me, I'm Matt Jones. I'm the head of product here at evaluagent, and I'm got the pleasure to be joined by Xander Freeman of Call Center Helper that everyone will know really well. But Xander, do you want to just give it a little bit of an intro, then we'll kick off into the webinar?
Sure, yeah, that was a very nice intro though. I do appreciate it. It's yeah, for those who don't know me, my name is Xander Freeman. I'm digital content director at Call Center Helper. For those who aren't familiar with Call Center Helper or CCH, because I'm so tired of saying the full name constantly every time I'm on camera. We're the world's largest, we say we're the world's largest online community of contact center professionals. It's effectively just one massive website, all free to access. Blogs, best practices, webinars like this, reports, everything you could imagine, just to, try and better educate people on what is quite a challenging and increasingly challenging industry. So that's what we are.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you for that. And I guess today we're going to be talking about from scores to signals and how people are turning auto QA from kind of insights and scores, isn't it, into tangible business improvements and maybe just look at and take advantage of some of the research that Xander and the team at Call Center Help have done to look at kind of where people are with auto QA today, the state of it. I can talk about some of the numbers that we see, and then I guess some of the learnings, Xander, from the conversations you're having, the conversations I'm having, and we'll just go from there. How's that sound?
Sounds lovely. Yeah, I think that's the key thing is, especially if you look at where we are at the moment in terms of, March 2026, it's so important to learn from what others are doing and take advantage of like situations like this where you've got a ton of anecdotal evidence that you can basically build the business case and learn how you could implement it in your contact center.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I think one thing we'll start with for the audience today is there should be a little poll that just appears on your screen in a moment. And I think it's going to be really useful for Xander and I to get a sense as to where the audience are today on that journey with auto QA. There's four options that appear on your screen, and there's no right or wrong answer, obviously, but there's four there. We haven't started, we're implementing it, or in early stages. We're up and running, but perhaps not fully utilizing the data that we're getting. I guess auto QA, you've gone from 3% to 100% coverage. It's a big shift in the volume of data that you've got. And then perhaps the final option, auto QA is embedded and driving action. If you're at that stage, please feel free to contribute as well to what Xander and I talk about today, and share your own tips and best practice and learning in the chat for everybody else to benefit as well. That would be an awesome approach to partake in today if you're at that stage. I think we are pretty much. I think most people have voted so far, so that poll's closed down, and we've got a nice spread there, Xander.
That's as
Even
nice a
across the
spread
top
as I think.
three.
Yeah, that is unbelievably even. To be fair, like when you and I were talking about this poll, I thought we'd get a nice mix. It's in a way, it's nice to see that final option with no one voting for it because again, it's such a subjective thing as well, right? Because if you're doing your QA journey right or your auto QA journey right, you're never really done with it anyway.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's always one of those things where you almost want, especially from an audience like today, with what you and I are going to be talking about, you want people that are either not started yet in the early stages where it's still like, right, we want to make sure we do this right, which is what I'm hoping people get out of today.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's it. Well, regardless of what stage you're at, hopefully today you'll get some insights and learnings for that journey that you either are about to go on, looking to go on, or perhaps already on with. I guess, Sander, from your perspective, I know I'll bring up the slide because call center helper, I guess, have done some research into where people are with quality assurance and what people are wanting to change most within QA. What did that research find? Do you want to just talk us through it and share that with the audience a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So CCH do annual research on a range of different topics for sort of customer contact. QA is obviously one of our key focuses there, especially if you look at what's going on at the moment. This is, I think the research you're seeing here is the 13th year we've done it. This year will be 14, which is really exciting. For the sake of time, there's a million different directions you and I could take today, Matt, looking at this data, but let's focus on those two main columns there. So you're looking at the desire for auto real-time QA and then more time for analyzing and calibrating. I think the key sort of overlap there with those two topics is really a desire for more capacity within your team. And I think as much as we could talk about AI in CX in general, there, I think when it's done right, the main word that I like to do, well, actually, it's two words. There's a proactive element to it, and it's capacity that you really want to be focusing on. And I think those two columns there really do cover that nicely. If you're doing it right and you're implementing this in the right way, it's all about, especially from a QA perspective, freeing up your capacity to be doing other things with your job as well. And I think one of the main things from my side, one of the main things when we had industry experts and consultants, analyzing this research on our behalf, and you'll see that in the report itself, it comes down to what you're doing with that capacity as well and how you articulate it to the wider team. When it comes to articulating it to the wider team, Matt, I know you and I are going to cover that directly later on as well, so I'll skip over that bit for now. But I think the main thing from my side and the main takeaway I would say from the data you're seeing on screen now is that's where it could be really useful for you. As much as, yes, it's nice to see 3% of calls covered or channels covered to 100%. If you could do it right, awesome. The key thing there is you don't need to do it in one go. And again, we'll get into that later. The main thing for me, at least, when I'm articulating this to our audience is look at it from a capacity perspective. Look at what business outcomes you can be driving by implementing this in the right way.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that, Xander, because I think I'm having very similar conversations, or certainly have been having very similar conversations for the past 18 months or so, which is typically along the lines of the business has a desire to implement AI and is putting mandates across all business areas to implement and make use of AI as much as possible, and rightly so for all the opportunities that it's got. Um, QA is a use case that I understand and can see the application of AI within that use case very firmly. I think the interesting conversations I'm having, however, though, is to your point. Okay, well, yes, technology can do this for you, but equally, you've really got to think about what do you want to do with that capacity that you're creating to make it a tangible return on investment. Because, and we can come on to changing roles a little bit later on, but yeah, that's what the technology can do, isn't it? It can give you capacity and time back, but you've got to know what problems you want to solve with it. Otherwise, it's just data at the end of the day.
Well, exactly. And I think like you've touched on data there as well. I know we're going to touch on some of this as we go forward in the next 40 minutes or so. But I always say, and I think this is a nice way to actually open this webinar in a sense, I can't remember a time in my lifetime where contact center professionals have had more leverage over the wider business than they do right now. Like you mentioned, everyone is under pressure to implement AI at the moment, win or lose there. And ultimately, what is the one commonality with all AI use cases at the moment that is 100% you need this, you can't do it without it? It's data. Contact
Yeah.
centers hold all that data specifically because this is evaluagent. I'll do it for a QA perspective. quality is just data at the end of the day, and it's about how you use that. You put good quality data in the front end of an LLM, you get really good quality outputs out the other side. One thing I'll say before we move on to the next section, Matt, is NVIDIA did one of their, I think it was their tentpole AI conference about 2 weeks ago in the West Coast of the US, and I was looking at some of the key takeaways from it. There's a lot, especially in our industry as well, and it's completely understandable where people talk about job losses as well, and especially when we're talking about increased capacity, does that mean job losses? One of the things you and I are going to talk about is how to set yourself up to limit the exposure to that. And one thing NVIDIA said on that at that event that they did was accountants didn't go extinct at the invention of a calculator, which I think is a really nice way of looking at it here. It's if you embrace this technology and learn how to use it in the right way, you're setting yourself up really nicely to succeed in the future, regardless of what direction we go in.
Yeah, it's 100% that, Xander. I think, and apologies if my video is a little laggy for people on screen today. Hopefully the audio is crystal clear and it can be a podcast rather than a webinar, but we'll see what we can do about that in the background. I think you're absolutely right, Xander, in terms of that was the conversations I was having a lot, probably about 12 to 18 months ago, was people are trying to grasp what are the fundamentals that I need to get in place in order to do this, because there's two ways to do it. You can rush into AI and you can, as all things, if you automate something that isn't solid underneath, you just get more failure. You just then expose things with greater noise, greater volume. Actually, the conversation I've been having a lot is you've got to make sure the fundamentals are in place. And that applies to QA as well. So a great example is making sure you know what good looks like. Sounds really simple, right? But AI can simply expose the lack of understanding of what good looks like, because if you can't explicitly tell the AI what it needs to look for, it won't give you the results that you've got. That's not necessarily a failure of the technology in most instances. It's a lack of clarity as to what good and the definition of good looks like.
You put rubbish at the front end of an LLM, you're going to get rubbish out the other side.
Yeah, and I think I must admit, that's probably where I've spent the majority of my time over the last 12 to 18 months, is just having honest conversations with people, explaining what the technology can and can't do, and also not necessarily being limited by technology. A great example in the QA world is that pushback from people which says, well, the AI can't evaluate my entire scorecard because one of those line items requires the human evaluator to go into the CRM system of record, find whether the agent has altered the metadata field, and then that's part of the assessment. Completely agree. And no technology provider can do that today. But to your first point around capacity, well, but we can automate 90% of the scorecard. And what does that mean?
It's not but I think that's the key thing to when we're talking about autocue, especially when you look at like the poll results that we saw earlier. It's not a binary one or the other situation. It's a fluid thing to look at. You don't need to jump immediately from 3%. I keep picking on 3%. I don't know why. 3% to 100%. You can do this incrementally. You can do it in stages. You can pick the metadata you want to be tasking this on and build up slowly. It's the best way to do it. And where you see these companies fail at implementing AI, I mean, Gartner have the statistic, I can't remember exactly what it was. It was about a percentage of total AI projects that fail. Gartner were taking that in a broader sense. Within customer service, that figure is actually quite a bit higher because of the inherent availability of data, like we talked about earlier. But the ones that really succeed, and we will get into this, especially when we get to the Q&A section later on, the ones that really succeed, I find, are the ones that do it in bite size. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Just take it bit by bit. If you try and bite off too much, you just lend yourself to failure there because you're overexposed internally. If you take on this project, make sure you do it in the right way. Companies like evaluagent will help you in that regard as well, because ultimately they're better off if the project works. It sounds stupid, honestly. So many people just go, oh yeah, whatever. It's one of those things where work on those small use cases. It's where I think if you look at from a marketing perspective, look at the case studies that these companies are putting out there, because ultimately this is what you want to be really doing here. I think case studies have never been more important from a from a vendor perspective at this point. It's what we try and highlight with CCH is some of these success stories. Incidentally, as well, this doesn't work from a marketing sense, but as much as we can talk about case studies of first movers, first losers are also, I would say, even more important to look at.
Yeah.
Find the commonality in what they've done wrong and learn from it before you implement it in your own thing. Matt, look at the screen you've got up right now. Change management is on there, and that's so important as well.
Yeah.
I always say one of the easy wins there is bring your agents along with you where you can. Ultimately, you can have the best QA programs in the business. If you don't bring your agents along and they don't understand what you're trying to do, you're setting yourself up to failure before you even begin that project.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's two sides to any change, isn't there? There's the technology piece, which is perceptually maybe the harder piece. In reality, that's the easier piece. It's the people that go alongside it that's where the real effort is required. I think that's why I come back to those fundamentals. Do you have a clear definition of what good looks like in your business in order to do reliable QA? Are your agents and your team leaders involved in the process? Do you have clear definitions of guidelines? Are you linking that back to business metrics? All those fundamentals that we talk about don't necessarily go away with auto QA. It's the polar opposite. They become even more important.
No, but the thing is with that as well, you can see this coming to an extent. Like if you look at historically within contact centers, look at the way data management was sort of seen and prioritized, or rather lack of prioritized, from an overall company perspective. And I can understand that. At its core, it can be, if you're doing it in the wrong way, it can be quite a laborious, boring job to do. It's also not a one and done solution. Either you can't just say, right, that's it. It's a bit like a human agent. You need to check in on them every now and again to make sure they're progressing in the right way. And let's keep it to auto QA because obviously that's what we're talking about today. If that data's rubbish, I keep saying this, but I will hammer it home eventually. It's if that data's rubbish, it doesn't matter anything else. It could be the best technology. It could be you could have even brought your agents along in the process. If you're putting rubbish into the front end of that LLM, you are gonna get rubbish out the other end. If you ever see me in person, I will phrase that slightly stronger, but I'm trying to keep my language PG for the sake of evaluation. But it's honestly that's the key thing there is, and I understand why as well. Like we go into a lot of contact centers globally as CCH, both in person and virtual, and you can see when you bring up knowledge management, it's better now than it was a year ago, and a year ago was better than it was 2 years ago. But it's still one of those things that you need to constantly work on.
100%. I think we see this. I know you kind of we did the poll at the start of the webinar. You shared some call center helper data, and one of the things I've been looking at in our own product usage as well is just understanding for the last 12 months what has that shift been in terms of the breakdown of manual evaluations to automated evaluations, and some data here. It's anonymized, obviously, but you can see here at the start of 2025 for us as a platform, the majority of evaluations were still being completed manually. But as we look towards the end of 2025, that shift is flipped. And I think to your point, that's people and kind of genuine data of where people are on this journey. Most have made that shift from pilot to production now. And the ones that have got it right is because, to your point, they've got those fundamentals in place and they don't see it as a one and done. It's an iterative journey.
Iterative journey is probably the way I phrase it as well, right? It's like that. I can repeat myself over and again with this, but ultimately we can just get the marketing team to clip that one bit and just send it out on loop. It's fine. It's basically that's the key thing for me. I mean, I talk to a lot of people, and because of like the marketing side of what we do, I talk to a lot of vendors and end users and consultants about trends for the future within AI and CX. One of the things I'm seeing a lot of repeatedly this year is 2026 is the year where people are going to have to start to prove ROI on it. That's not just within CX. Look at OpenAI with Sora in the last week or so. They're shuttering certain things. There's a little bit more focus on, right, we actually do need to prove ROI at this point.
Yeah.
With the context of CX, QA, and auto QA is a great way of doing that. And again, you can start off small with it and build up.
I think this is what we're seeing, that confidence is growing in the technology. People are getting used as to how to use it, how to keep it up to date, how to tweak it. And it does genuinely for us as a business feel as that tipping point is where AI has kind of stopped being something that we're testing in the QA space to this is how teams actually operate day to day now. That's how we're seeing it in the data.
But I also think if you look at it in a broader sense as well, as much as we as industry professionals can get a little bit more comfortable with the technology, know how to use it, know the applications. The bit that lags behind is the consumer perception of AI as well. And I hosted a webinar last week on voice AI as well. And it's one of those things you almost need that part of it to make sure this product is completely successful there. With auto QA, you don't really need that. You just need the internal opt-in, which is why I always recommend it as a really good pilot program for if you're under pressure to go down that route. This is a really nice way of doing it because you can keep the guardrails on, you can keep it internal only, you can set it up to succeed. You also retain ownership of the project. IT will also be your friend on this one because it's pretty well data led, so you don't need to get involved in too much of the other subjective elements of AI and external customer data, etc. You can keep it pretty internal. So this is what I love talking about auto QA at the moment. It's really nice.
It's a great subject. I guess you mentioned it a couple of minutes ago. Obviously, have the opportunity to visit lots of other contact centers and CX teams across the globe. I'm interested to understand kind of what you've seen there, because there's loads of positives and we can talk about ROI all day. But I guess because a lot of people today are kind of early on in their journey and they're probably coming to here thinking, well, what are the things that I'm not even aware of that might trip me up? What would you say, like what areas are you seeing where QA programs plateau?
There's a few, there's like everything on this, there's so many different areas we can go in. I know we're limited for time, so I'll keep it to a few highlights there. We talk a lot about silos in this industry, and it really does ag me off. My eye twitches anytime someone brings up silos with me these days. But it is true, honestly, and it's, you and I spoke before about QA sort of stops short when results stay inside the QA team. And that's where it's important. We've mentioned it before, bring other people on your journey here. You need to get that component of it right. And that's where some of them fail. Some of them fail in a broader sense because they try too much too fast there and you forget about some of the easy bits. For example, I was having a conversation yesterday and we were talking about QA, actually, which is always fun. And it was one of those things where I was asking them, give me some examples from a global remit. So this was a company that operate on a global scale. Some of the idiosyncrasies within certain teams that have to affect quality monitoring on there as well. So the weighting on it is really interesting. And you've got to remember, you can't just template this. So many programs fail because, again, through no fault of their own, QA professionals get stretched too far, get asked to do too much, and have to default to templates. The example I'll give here is they were talking about their Japanese teams that done sort of independently, same system, same team, but ultimately the weighting on there is completely different because their Japanese teams put far more weight on the cultural side of things. So their weighting was very binary in the sense of 0 or 100 based on, did they do the right greetings? Did they ask these phrases? Did they be seen to be doing the right things there? And again, I use that example because it's quite an easy one to say and I can do it in about 30 seconds. But the whole point of what I'm trying to say here is personalize it to the regions. Ultimately, that only really affects the massive teams here when we're talking about QA, but the same lessons can be applied to the small scale as well, especially when we get involved in the coaching side of things.
Yeah.
We haven't
I think even at a line item level though, Xander, you're absolutely right on that. Like, so to give everybody a view as to kind of our own product development here at evaluagent as well, when this technology first came about two and a half, we went down the route of trying to build some out the box line items on the assumption that it's new technology and people aren't sure how to use it and how to prompt it. So let's build some out the box line items that look at empathy, tone of voice, those softer skills. And actually we've fundamentally moved away from that in the last 12 months because, to your point, and every channel and even every type of interaction, you've got to invest in a platform that allows you to tailor the underlying reasoning for your own business and your definition of good. And that's what we've worked on instead of the out of the box stuff, because you're absolutely right. It is so unique for every business. You've got to have the capability to add your own context into a platform for the AI to know what good looks like at your business.
I think the key thing I want to put out there is what good looks like, or your definition of good. It's such a subjective term to take here. What is good? What is bad? What is 0%? What is 100%? Define it, because your AI platform, not saying you as an evaluator, but AI platforms in general will not define it themselves. I did one of my dissertations a depressing amount of time ago on sentiment analysis. Now that was all around. Do you remember Innocent Smoothies before they were taken over by Coke? They did a whole that the whole
Yeah.
marketing was around very much like blog driven stuff, and it was all very consumer. My dissertation was around consumer perception before and after the takeover by Coke, considering the way they tried to position themselves. Anyway, I could talk for ages about that, and it wasn't even that successful a dissertation. But sentiment analysis has come on leaps and bounds there, but it still can't define what your organization perceives as good or bad there. You have to be the one to do it. And we talk a lot about human in the loop or whatever you want to say there. It's not just a buzz term. It is legitimate, as in you do need to keep that. And again, QA professionals have such a unique opportunity within this sort of project scope to go, right, this is where we need those guardrails. This is where we need those guardrails. This is what we need at the beginning of this project to make sure it's a success.
Yeah, and I think you referenced it right at the start of this kind of section around within the QA team, and I guess you'll have seen it in those visits. The best QA teams are sharing all that insight across the business because it can inform everything from process change to policy guidance to product development.
Absolutely.
You've got so much insight, right?
Oh, so much. And it's again like one of the things that you and I wanted to talk about for this bit is the sort of the empathetic balance there. Because I think one of the unique, I don't want to call it frustration for QA teams. I actually think it's a really nice opportunity. Especially these days, the role is getting more and more data driven. And I know we're going to come on to the evolving role later on, so I'm going to keep this short now. The role and roles in customer service in general are becoming more and more data driven there because inherently they are based on everything else you and I have talked about today. But QA teams have to balance that empathetic role when it comes to the coaching side of things as well, which when you're being forced down that binary numbers, either right or wrong route, it's so hard to balance that out with the coaching side and remember what it's like to be in there. And again, I know we'll touch on it later, but that balance just to set that up really does matter. And it's something that I think we'll talk about it later, but it's something that if I were in the audience, this would be one of the things that I'd really want to take away from today.
And just think about those evolving roles. I guess it's interesting though. Like, before we get to that area, I know we're both quite interested in this. There'll be another poll that pops up on screen. It'll be interesting to see what the audience's biggest challenge is. I guess once the QA scores are in, so once you've completed your evaluations on that monthly basis, if that's how you're doing it today, but you're struggling to get those senior stakeholders and leadership to act on it, maybe that's one. Maybe it's translating to your point a moment ago, Xander. How do you translate that hard factual data into meaningful progressive coaching conversations?
Yeah.
From a team leader perspective, maybe first and foremost. Thirdly, maybe it's agents themselves not trusting QA, and we've all been in that room where agents say, well, you just picked my worst calls, or I completely disagree, and they don't know the definition. Or maybe it's just not knowing where to start. So hopefully there's a poll that could come on screen. I think my audio is a little bit dodgy, but the poll is on, and hopefully everybody will be able to vote on that. We'll just give it a minute.
To be fair, Matt, when you do cut out, I mean, you pick the best moments to cut out there because at least you're doing it when the audience can see exactly what you're saying at the same time. So I think we're okay.
Good. So I think there's a poll on screen. I'll just give everyone a second or two to complete that, and then I think the results will be on screen. That's really interesting. 55% of the audience are saying agents not trusting or engaging with the results is probably the hardest challenge. What do you make of that?
I think to a certain extent it's a bit predictable, not in a bad way, but we've all been there as well, right? Like you said, a lot of I don't know too many people that have started in QA and stayed in QA. I know a lot of people that ended up in QA from being agents first, and I think those are the people that can really, if you could take yourself back to that time as well, like you said, why they picked that call, why they do this. You and I mentioned probably about 5 minutes into this webinar, it's all about bringing the internal stakeholders along with you in this process. You can get around hopefully if you and I did this again in 6 months' time, it might be a little bit less than 55% because of what we're going to be talking about today. But ultimately, you can bring them along in that process with you. Have an open conversation with them. Start with the team leaders. Get the team leaders to pick a spectrum of agents within there as well. Don't just take the top performing ones, take a mix of it as well. You don't need to bother all of them with this, but you need to phrase it in a way of this is beneficial for you if you can give up your time to do this now. And again, you and I are going to be talking about driving business outcomes later on in this webinar, Matt. But ultimately, if you phrase it like that, everybody wins.
I think we were going to come on to kind of how do you translate QA data for different stakeholders. And I know I guess there's an easy one for getting leaders bought into it, which is, well, you just translate it to pounds and pence and the impact on the KPIs that matter to them. I guess the agent one is perhaps, given that response to the poll, where we should focus more attention on. What you highlighted a few examples of getting your best agents involved. Any specifics that you can share on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about it before, and whenever I talk about this on the CCH stuff, I always call it the Rosetta Stone approach, sort of thing. So it's all about translating it to different stakeholders. I can see the comment in from Mark in the chat there as well. Mark, for the record, I 100% agree with you with that. For those who can't see the chat, he's talking about agents saying it's not part of my KPI. Why should I care when it comes to QA? Again, we've heard the same things before. This is a perfect example of what I'm about to say with the Rosetta Stone approach. Translate it into their KPIs. You don't need to artificially put QA in their KPIs. Show them how QA already relates to the KPIs they have right now. And if you can do that, you'll have a far better chance. You won't get through to all of them, inevitably. I would love a perfect world where contact centers have a limited budget and everyone's very receptive and everyone has the time and the capacity. But anyway, we don't live in that world. You're never going to get through to all of them, but you can get through to some of them by doing this. And honestly, once you've got through to some of them, it tends to breed through the rest of them as well, because it's not you selling this approach to them, it's other agents selling that approach to the other agents. Which, Mark, thank you so much for asking that question or that tip when you did, because it really gave you a lovely example for the Rosetta Stone thing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Xander. I think tying it back to the metrics, like anything, you tie it back to what people care about. You won't solve it for everybody, but you have a much better chance of convincing the people that were on the fence before.
I think so. And again, like, I mean, you picked the stakeholder of the senior leadership team. We talk a lot about trying to get contact centers to be seen not as a cost center, but as an insight hub these days. How do you do that? The stereotypical answer is, like you said, you translate it into pounds, dollars, euros, you take your pick wherever you are in the world. But ultimately, I say yes to that, but it's also within the same context, show them the impact it has as well. It's not just it will save this, it will do this, because that, if you lead with that, then inevitably it opens the door to cost savings elsewhere, which is a conversation that, like, you can see where some businesses take that route. If you can lead that conversation into, we're going to get this time back, which we're going to put into this, which is going to lead CSAT scores to increase, which is going to lead this to increase. Translate those metrics into something that really matters for them. That changes on business to business. You never know what it's going to be.
You just remind me. I was in an insurance contact center 2 weeks ago, and one of the things that they were talking about is their monthly listen back sessions that they do with their senior leadership team, and the effectiveness of combining that hard data with the examples and those emotional pulls, which is showing to those senior leaders, this is the experience that customers are receiving, and literally showing them a transcript or playing back the call, and leaders, like anyone, a human is at the end of the day, being able to pull both on the rational the rational feelings and the emotional heartstrings is how you drive that change ultimately.
I think when you look at, it's a really interesting point, when you look at the sort of upper echelon of contact center leaders, inevitably contact center is a very insular industry. Most people tend to come from within there as well. Bringing them back, showing them transcripts, showing them live recordings will put them back in the mind of when they started out in their career as well. Bring it back home for them. Bring that, you know, that, what's the Disney thing? Is it Ratatouille, the one with the rat, where it brings that chef back to him as a kid?
Yes. Yeah.
Related to something like that, in the sense of bring them back to it, and you'll get them on a far more empathetic terms, and you can then articulate it in the right way. I mean, we talked about senior leaders needing pounds or dollars, but the same is true there. If you look at the attrition rates, that's what you could do from a sort of WFM perspective or an ops perspective. Translate it into the metrics that matter for them, and it will, like I say, it sounds a bit like a non sequitur, but if you just try and do it, pick something small in your team. WFM is a good one. I always say marketing is a really good one as well, to go for. Marketing and contact centers historically have a little bit more of a fractious relationship, where
Yeah,
from what I've seen, and it's always
yeah,
nice. Give them something there that show, right, when you do this, this is what we get. If you give us a heads up, we can do this and provide this for you. And all these wonderful insights that they want because they're being tasked with similar projects to you. And if you can offer them, you get all these insights. If you just give us a heads up, you'll get a little bit more leeway with them.
100%. I think Dave makes a really good point and around kind of agents are trusting QA, but getting them to trust AI is the tricky part.
Mm.
Absolutely, it's new technology. People are still working out how to respond to it, and I think that's where it comes down to making sure that you can defend
Yeah.
the outputs of the AI, and you can explain how it's got to that rationale and that reasoning is
Show
one, Dave.
them, show them under the hood as
Yeah,
well. Start
yeah,
small. Pick a couple of different bits of metadata that you think is fairly insular. Again, you can do it on a small scale. Just show them, right, okay, what would you want to see automated here? Bring them into that conversation. You don't actually need at the end of the day to take their word for it, but at least it shows that you're listening to them. And if you can show them a small scale project, right, it's not a terrifying acronym. No, no, no. We can do these things small and we can see the benefit for you in that.
yeah.
That's how I've seen it work well.
And I think Mark in the chat as well just makes a great point that I was about to come on to, which is there should be a workflow where agents can dispute a score and allow QA to act as the judge. Yes, absolutely, Mark. That
We
needs to be in your process.
we talk so much about escalation for like in the wider contact center based from a customer side. This is the exact same equivalent for QA teams and agents within a QA process. It's a really, really good point, Mark. I really like it.
Interesting. I guess we're talking about deploying auto QA and AI, and I guess that comes naturally with your very first point about it gives us some capacity, and we wanted to spend some time on this evolving role of the QA professional. What have you seen, Xander? Like how are you having these conversations with QA teams and senior leaders across the contact center? What are they saying?
We touched on it briefly earlier. The role of a QA professional is, I mean, storyteller is right there on the screen. Honestly, that pretty much encapsulates it really nicely. It's so difficult at the moment to be a QA professional in certain instances. You have to be so many different things. I mean, to be fair, Matt, you've timed this transition really nicely there. You have to be an analyst, you have to be a coach, you have to be a storyteller at the same time, especially when senior leadership is under pressure of having implemented AI. Again, if you're doing it with auto QA, you're the one that has to actually articulate that to them, to that leader, then articulating it to the wider board members of the organization. You have to learn how to do these things. You can't just go, right, I know how to do this now. It is a process. Use that extra capacity that in theory you've got from these projects to say, right, before we start this, this is how much time I should be getting back. This is what I want to do with it. And that's the important thing to take there. You can learn how to do these things. And like the example I gave earlier from the NVIDIA thing with accountants and calculators, learn how to use these tools in a way that sets you up to succeed there, and you will be setting yourself on the right path.
Yeah,
Let's say that.
yeah. And this is what we see all the time. Like, the difference between teams that recognize the opportunity to fundamentally shift the perception of QA inside their organizations are the ones that win here, because it's not just about getting time back, it's being seen as and changing perceptions. Maybe can we go back to being seen as the quality police almost, and just check boxes and the negative connotations that come with that,
Mm.
through to actually almost being seen as this oracle. And to your earlier point around engaging other departments, you'll quite quickly be dragged into that room and say, bring this person on because they've got all this insight from all these conversations, and that they're the oracle, frankly.
Well, I mean, Charlie's comment there in the chat encapsulates that quite nicely. So, what are your best practice
Yeah.
recommendations for presenting QA data to stakeholders versus frontline agents to ensure it drives action rather than just reporting? Charlie, what I'd say to that, and again, it segues us really nicely, so thanks for putting that in when you did. It comes back to what we were saying before about, articulate it for the metrics that matter to those stakeholders. It changes entirely. If we want to be driving actions, make it matter to them. The same thing I said earlier about Dave's, was it Dave's point? No, it was Mark's point around translating that into something that, like QA metrics into agent metrics. The same is true for any other stakeholder in the organization. They will be tracked on certain things. The beauty of QA, if you go back one slide, Matt, to those
Yep.
3 points on there, from a from a data perspective, you can more or less craft the narrative you want to be crafting there, win or lose. You have the tools to do that. You just need to learn how to actually use them in the right way, and again, translate it into the metrics that matter for that stakeholder. Is what I'd say.
I think correlation is so important, isn't it, Xander? Like
Mm.
as you say, like we often talk to people around how you can correlate quality scores. So we have some predictive metrics like XMPS and X resolution and X repeats. Being able to correlate QA scores to those kind of more board level metrics,
Yeah.
it completely changes the game, Charlie, as well.
It's
Um,
education as well, right? You've got to,
yeah,
at a certain point, you've got to, those board members or those stakeholders, senior stakeholders, have to be willing to be educated on this is how I'm trying to meet you in the middle here. Sometimes they're going to be sticks in the mud, and that's fine. And then just go down a data binary route with numbers, make it matter to
and
them.
I think we kind of touched on what high performing teams are doing differently, Xander. And perhaps we can move straight to the Q&A because I'm conscious of time and I'm
Yeah, I
very
think so.
keen to give everybody the opportunity to enter some questions in the chat and we can cover
Mm.
those off. Um, whilst we're waiting for some questions to come in, I guess what what's the one tip that you would give someone? We'll go with that.
Um, the data point is one I'd probably say, and if I had to drill down data into one word, it's probably context. And that's the important thing for me here from here. If I was a QA professional, knowing what I know now, it all comes down to context. Use that data in the way, but it's important to contextualize it, right? Data,
Yeah,
as much as it is binary, can be so subjective, especially from a quality
I
perspective.
guess this is a good question actually. How do you upskill QA teams to become coaches and storytellers rather than scorers? That's come in anonymously. That's a great question.
Honestly, I found certain consultants are quite good in this space. I mean, God knows we have a lot of them in this space in the UK and globally there as well. But the important thing there is there's a narrative behind it. You don't need just people that only know QA or only know contact centers. It's about using that data. And again, I keep saying it, it's articulating it in a very certain way. And that's where I found some of the best from is again, it could be from an event, it could be from a webinar, it could be from you could have them in your contact center as part of a training exercise. It's about learning best practices from other people.
Yeah, I'd say it's practice, as you say. You
Yep.
just practice storytelling, and you can use AI for this because the context of the story that you're trying to tell doesn't matter a huge amount. It's
Mm.
more we learned it in primary school how to tell a story. Go back to that level, and AI can help you craft it. I personally use it all the time, as people at evaluagent will know. It's
Yeah.
really powerful to help battle test the story that you're trying to tell.
I use the
That's how
bookend
I do
approach.
it.
Well, I use
Yeah,
the bookend approach to something like this. You start from the data on one side and the end outcome on the other, what you want to actually get from the conversation, and then you work out the middle of it from there. That middle can change every time, and it will change every time you do that exercise. Because, like you said, you will get better at this the more you do it as well. It sounds simplistic, but honestly, it's true. When I
yeah.
first started doing some of these talks as well, I was useless at it to a certain extent. But you do more and
I
more of
can't
them.
believe that. I'm
Oh, you
sure
do
that
more
never
of them.
happened.
If I drink enough Red Bull, I can do anything, I think. And I'm not just saying that to get a free trip to Salzburg at some point. It's honestly like it sounds simplistic, but repeating it on your own. I've seen certain QA teams form like you could call them QA huddles, training huddles, whatever you want to do. Train on each other. Put yourself in a role-playing situation of right, I'm going to be this agent. You can use real calls to do that as well. Real calls, put yourself in the shoes of right, this is what an agent said to me when I was trying to deliver that feedback. Role play it within your teams. QA agents know what you're going through because you're all the same in that regard. So
Yeah.
it's I think that's a really nice sort of best practice for how I've seen certain people do it is put yourself in the shoes and role play there. Yeah, mock calls, Mark, exactly like you said.
Brilliant. And I'm conscious of we've just come up to time, Xander. So I just want to say thank you from everyone at evaluagent for taking the time out of your diary as well to come along to today's webinar and share all that research and experience and knowledge that you've got, because I think everyone on today's webinar will have found it extremely useful. And yeah, thank you.
No, thanks so much for having me. I honestly think QA in general is such an interesting topic right now. As much as we could talk about centers being quite insular, QA teams as well are guilty of the same thing, and it's not a bad thing. It's a really nice community, and I always love the opportunity to do stuff like this, just because we learn from each other. Like I say, as much as we could talk about role playing amongst QA teams, what the hell are we doing right now? It's exactly the same thing. So thank you
Yeah.
for having me and giving me this platform to actually, share this best practice.
No, no problem at all. And thanks to everybody that's come along today. I can see people just starting to drop off as they've got other meetings to go to. So thank you very much for attending. I think, as Xander alluded to at the start, Call Center Helper is a great resource to go and find more information. The evaluagent team are also pushing out lots of data as well, and research and advice. So hopefully we'll see you on another webinar very soon. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day and yeah, enjoy. Thanks for coming along.